Today's podcast is sponsored by Ordinary Vegan CBD oil from hemp. As we age, our endocannabinoid system needs enhancing, and CBD oil can enhance and influence the receptors that cause us pain, inflammation, anxiety, and depression. And the best part is, it's all natural, made from plants. You can find all Ordinary Vegan's organically grown, GMO-free vegan CBD products at ordinaryvegan.net/shop.
You're listening to the Ordinary Vegan Podcast, where we teach you everything you need to know about adopting a plant-based diet full or part-time. Our goal is to empower you to live a long and healthy life. You can find today's show at ordinaryvegan.net or on iTunes. If you have any questions, please send an email to questions@ordinaryvegan.net.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Ordinary Vegan Podcast, number 66. If we haven't met, my name is Nancy Montori, and I am the founder of Ordinary Vegan, the podcast, the website, and of the health and wellness community of over 500,000 people who want to live a more compassionate life that is kind to themselves, to the planet, and to animals. I believe every healthy plate of food is a form of self-love, and when you love yourself, anything is possible in this world. So thank you so much for being here. Every November, we celebrate World Vegan Month, and I am kicking off the month with a very special guest. Her name is Colleen Goudreau. She is a best-selling author of 5 books, including the best-selling book, The 30-Day Vegan Challenge, and her latest book called The Joyful Vegan. She is also a podcaster, international speaker, and advocates veganism as a means by which to prevent animal cruelty. I was first introduced to Colleen way back in 2011. She was speaking at a vegan bloggers convention. At the time, I was a newbie, vegan for 3 months, and to be honest, I had no idea how long I was going to be vegan and what it meant to be vegan, and I was just pretty clueless, but I was doing my best. All I knew at the time was that I believed in the connection of animal protein in my health, and I was taking it one day at a time. Then I attended Colleen's lecture, and she opened my eyes to the bigger picture, the bigger meaning of becoming vegan. And after hearing her speak, I knew that there was no going back to animal food. So today's podcast is kind of full circle for me. Colleen's new book, The Joyful Vegan, couldn't have been released at a better time, because there is more interest than ever in eating more plants and putting more compassion out in the world. Colleen explores so many themes in her new book about what eating more plants mean in prioritizing compassion. She also breaks down with great insight the 10 stages that many vegans experience when they stop eating animals. The Joyful Vegan is available on Amazon, and you can learn more about Colleen Goudreau on her website, colleenpatrickgoudreau.com. And you can find her podcast on her website or whatever podcatcher you subscribe to. Now, let's chat with Colleen. Hi, Colleen.
Hi, Nancy. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I am so excited to have you as a guest today and appreciate you taking the time to visit the Ordinary Vegan community. And we are very excited about your new book, The Joyful Vegan. When does it come out?
I think people are getting it now. I mean, I think the official publication date is November 12th, but I think people who ordered already are starting to get it. So really, people can get it now from wherever books are sold.
All right. That's so exciting. Over the years, you've been responsible for driving plant-based eating into the mainstream. So how did you get started in the business of compassion, and how long have you been vegan?
I have been vegan 20 years. This is my 20-year anniversary actually this year.
Wow.
And I got in the business of compassion just asking the question, how can I help? How can I contribute? What are my skills? What are my passions? Once I became vegan, I was vegetarian prior to being vegan, but really when you become vegan, and we can talk about what that means, because I'm always interested in language and how that characterizes the process for most of us. But when I became vegan, I really stepped up my advocacy, really was incredibly passionate about this newfound lifestyle, compassion, openness that I was experiencing. And so I started doing outreach right away. And because my theory is that people just don't know. I mean, sometimes they're willfully unaware, and sometimes they're just unaware, and they don't realize that they're being conditioned to stay unaware and asleep. So I just believed that when people are exposed to the information, they will be compelled to make steps in the right direction, whatever that was going to look like. And so I started doing outreach, doing education. I started teaching cooking classes. I was doing street TV where I was showing Meet Your Meat, which is a video. I wonder if PETA still uses it. Alec Baldwin had narrated it. This is 20 years ago now, but I think there's still a version of it out there. And I would show that on the street, and people would come up and either ask questions or cry or just basically say, I want to make a change, but I don't know how. And so I just really kept trying to fill in that gap and trying to give people the how, because I do feel like people know the why. In general, people have a sense that it's not great to be an animal raised and killed for human consumption, and that it's not great for our bodies to process these animal products. And so people have the sense of the why vegan, but I felt then and I still feel now it's the transition, and it's the tools and resources that they lack to actually do it, especially because it means that you are out of the status quo. It means that you're not part of the majority, and it means that you're making some changes. And I think people struggle with change, and that's why I started doing it. I was obviously thrilled to be able to do it as a career. I was working 2 jobs when I was starting out. I was working for a nonprofit, writing content, and was building basically what I have built today. So when I was able to leave that job and do this full time, it's great to be in the business of compassion, as you put it, literally.
Well, speaking of language, plant-based and plant-forward eating styles are becoming increasingly common among health and environmentally conscious consumers. So plant-based eating may be edging out veganism as the current term, even though on many levels they overlap values and they go hand in hand. So what is your opinion of the difference between the two terms? And has the term plant-based has it replaced veganism?
I don't necessarily think so. When I hear that, I think because it means a lot of different things, it's pretty open-ended. And I think people like to be in a box, but they don't want to feel that they're stuck in that box. And they also want to be able to control what the meaning of that box is. And I think plant-based, to me, it's another iteration of flexitarian. It's another iteration of part-time vegetarian or it gives people the opportunity to characterize themselves in a way that people can understand what that means, but not be afraid of the, in this case, ethical implications. Because I think there is an understanding that with veganism, there is also the added component of not wanting to contribute to harm against animals in any way. And that's part of the process for vegans as well. When I first became vegan, I didn't just say, oh my gosh, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to get rid of my leather shoes, and I'm going to, only eat plant foods, and I'm not going to go to circuses, and I'm not going to go to zoos. It's part of the awakening process that you realize, oh, what am I doing over here? Well, if I'm doing that over here and I'm making a difference over here and I'm not contributing to violence against animals that are raised for human consumption, well, then what about the animals who are in laboratories? And what about the animals who are in circuses and zoos? You just keep going with your awakening. And that happens also with plant-based. I mean, people who stop consuming animal products or lessen the number of animal products they're eating tend to be compelled to want to look more. And so that's why often people will start with health, or they'll start with not eating land animals. That's how I started. I stopped eating land animals first, and then it was aquatic animals, and then it was everything that came out of an animal. It's a process for most of us. So if that word, if plant-based is accurate for people and it characterizes who they are and how they're eating, I think it's great. People I have, I'm not going to dictate to anybody about how they should characterize themselves. But I would say this. I would say that if you're afraid to use the word vegan because of whatever implications you think it holds, then I don't think that's being authentic. And I think there's a danger zone we're in, because if we don't want to go deeper or have that conversation with people, or only go so far and not look at any other, effects of our behavior, then we're actually still staying asleep, and we're not really allowing ourselves to manifest our values, right? So people can call themselves what they want. And of course, language is still limiting. Vegan for me means something because it does kind of, I've said this so many times, but I really mean it. Vegan is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. And I think that's the real crux that I think my hope is that everyone will understand that, and that vegans will understand that, because I think when you think about being vegan as the end, as the goal, as the badge to wear, you get hung up on being perfect. Whereas if you see being vegan as the means to the goal, and that goal could be optimal wellness, or it could be unconditional compassion, whatever the goal is, then you realize that, imperfection is built into being vegan, because imperfection is built into being human, and you do the best you can. But vegan means that to me. It's the manifestation of my values. It's a shortcut for reflecting my values in my behavior. And so that's why I embrace it. I tend to talk about plant-based as food, for food, and vegan for me as an identity. Some people call themselves plant-based. Some people refer to food as vegan, obviously. To me, it's just food. It's just plants. It's just, fruits and vegetables. But because there tends to be an ideology associated with vegan, I think some people are afraid of it. But I'll end with this, because it's a very long answer to your very short question. But I will say that there does seem to be evidence that people who claim an identity around the way they eat, in this case, not eating animal products, tend to own those values, claim that identity, own that identity more, and thus are beholden to them, and thus stay vegan or stay plant-based. Whereas if you're a little more loosey-goosey and you say, for instance, I eat plant-based versus I am plant-based, so you can still use plant-based as an identity. But if you, right, so using plant-based as an identity versus using vegan as an identity. And that is what I would suggest people kind of chew on a little bit, is owning how you eat as something you are, rather than just as something you do. That seems to support people staying in it for the long haul versus just something I do once in a while, right? And I'm not as committed to it. So there is something interesting around the language and around the way we characterize it. Whether you call yourself vegan or plant-based, it's a matter of owning that, as opposed to just saying, it's just something I do.
Right. Back in 2011, I saw you speak in Portland at the Vegan Bloggers Convention. And one of the many things that stuck out was your lecture about our obsession with single protein. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because it's, I think it's very enlightening and can help a lot of people, because that question still comes up a lot.
Right. So single nutrients. So our obsession with, calcium or protein or B12 or omega-3 fatty acids, these are a lot of the ones that come up specifically when people hear that someone is vegan or plant-based or someone's considering it. We are obsessed. There's just, there was a time when we weren't so obsessed with these single nutrients. And I do think it stops people from making changes because they have been convinced that the only way to consume these nutrients is by consuming animal products. So one of the things, first of all, I encourage people to do is just eat whole foods and eat a variety of whole plant foods as much as possible, and you will get all the nutrients you need. I do also supplement with a multi because I think we eat differently every day, and it's good to have insurance. And so that's how I see multivitamins. But in terms of our obsession with these single nutrients, the bottom line is that the nutrients we need are plant-based, even though we've all been told that the nutrients we need are animal-based. The nutrients we need are plant-based. The reason we get nutrients when we eat animals and animal products is because the animals ate plants. And what we're doing is going through the animal to get to the nutrients that the animals got because the animals ate plants. And so what I encourage people to do is to skip the middle animal and get the nutrients directly from the plants. Because when you do that, you're not only getting all of the nutrients and you're absorbing them even better, you're also skipping all of the problems that come with animal products. Obviously, the saturated fat, the dietary cholesterol, the animal protein, which is problematic, the lactose, etc. So people might say, well, what about B12? That's not plant-based. Well, it's not animal-based either. It's bacteria-based. So there are no nutrients that we need that comes from animals. All the nutrients we need comes from plants. And that's just common sense. Like, you don't have to become a nutritionist to understand that. You don't have to sit around and calculate how many nutrients you should get every day and what are you eating. I mean, if you want to, you can. It might be interesting for you, but I think you'll find that if you just relax and recognize that we need to skip the middle animal, and we'll skip so many problems, ethical problems, environmental problems, health problems. It's the best way to go. So yeah, just common sense, right?
What would you say to people who say to you, I can't go on a vegan diet because I'll miss cheese?
Well, one thing I really emphasize is that, people tend to do nothing at all because they think they have to do everything. And that's a perfect example where people will say something like, well, I could give up meat. I could give up chicken. I could give up beef. I could give up pork, whatever people say, but I could never give up X. And usually the X is cheese. And so my answer would be, well, then give up everything but cheese. The idea that you're not doing anything at all because you think you have to do everything is self-defeating. So don't do nothing because you can't do everything. Do something, anything. And what happens is when you allow yourself that flexibility, you realize, well, wait a second, I could go further than this. Of course I can. Of course I can can stop eating dairy-based cheese. It's not oxygen, right? We can live without cheese. And of course, there's wonderful non-dairy cheeses available, commercially, etc. So yeah, don't do nothing because you can't do everything. Do something, anything. Every step we take really does make a difference.
In your new book, The Joyful Vegan, you want to help people stay vegan in a world that wants us to eat meat, dairy, and eggs. Can we break that down a little bit and talk about what you say in Chapter 1 about blissful ignorance and willful blindness and the stories we are told?
Yeah, I really have to say Chapter 1 is my favorite chapter.
Yes.
So there's an introduction, which is my story. And then there's Chapter 1, which is don't tell me, I don't want to know. And it's willful blindness. And so, yeah, I mean, we are in every way encouraged to not look at the detrimental effects of meat, dairy, and eggs on our health, on the environment, on the animals, et cetera. We're conditioned not to look. We're done it through our families. We're conditioned through the industries themselves, the government policies that are put in place. All of these systems support us staying asleep, support us staying willfully blind. And I say willfully because people will say, don't tell me. People will say, don't show me. So there's an awareness that there's something on the other side of it that I don't want to look at. And my opinion is that the reason people don't want to look is because, well, A, it's upsetting. I mean, especially when it comes to the animal issues, but also because they know they will be compelled to change. And it's change people are afraid of. So staying willfully blind means I can just keep doing what I'm doing. I don't have to look at what's happening. I don't have to look at the consequences of my behavior. And quite literally, right? Ignorance is bliss. But I do question whether it is bliss, because you have to harden a part of your heart. You have to quite literally, mask yourself from the truth. You have to work kind of hard to avoid looking at what you know to be true, but don't want to see. And I would say, and I would argue that kind of conditional, compassion, where we're just saying, now I'm good just as I am. I don't want to, know more or expand my awareness. I think that's pretty limiting. And I think that's what's really funny about people who say I could never go vegan because it's so limiting, when quite literally every day when we are consuming animal products, we say, don't tell me, don't show me, I don't want to look, I don't want to know. To me, that's restrictive, that's limiting. And if you allow yourself to just look, to just peek in that direction, what I think is always the most surprising thing for people, and I think you might say that you experience this as well, I think most people do, is that you're surprised at how expansive it is. You're surprised at how many options you do have. You're surprised at how you see so much more than you never thought you would see, both in terms of food options and cuisines and spices and flavors and textures, but also in terms of actually feeling like, oh, I don't have to run from anything anymore. I don't have to avoid looking at anything anymore. I can just be open and be aware and be awake. And that feels really good. Now, I wrote a book and several books around, okay, well, being awake and aware feels really good. And yet there are challenges because we're social creatures. As I said, we are creatures of habit. We live in, different cultures, whether it's a, religion or it's, coming from a particular culture. And so we do have challenges that we do need to overcome, but that's mostly because, again, we are just supported in eating meat, dairy, and eggs from everybody around us. And when you live outside of the status quo, it can feel overwhelming. But you can hold both, right? You can be awake, you can be aware, you can experience the expansiveness and the joy in that. And you can also say, well, I'd at least rather be aware than be asleep. And I just have to manage some of these social aspects, which, to be honest, once you manage them, I think it makes us better human beings anyway, because we're talking about compassion and communication and understanding and patience and all of those good things. So in the end, we can hold both. We can be aware and we can also feel what it feels to be human, which sometimes doesn't feel great all the time.
Speaking of peeking in that direction, I personally don't believe that we should be subjected to animal abuse videos or photos in our social media feeds. Because to be honest, it's like putting a giant weight on my spirit. Mm-hmm. And it stays with me for such a long time. Mm-hmm. And shouldn't I have the right to seek out those photos and videos on my own? Mm-hmm. Why do some animal advocates have to, they saw it, so they feel that you have to see it. Mm-hmm. I honestly don't get that, and I'd love to get your thoughts about that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there's so much to say about that. I mean, so stage one in the book is bearing witness and the voracious consumption of information. Because once you see something that wakens you, you want to see more and you want to know more, and it's like you're making up for lost time and lost awareness because you were sleeping. And so I think we all experience that desire to kind of validate what it is that we just saw, and to read books and watch documentaries and seek out podcasts and watch videos. And so that's all part of the process, and it's all part of the journey. And I think that is something most of us go through, even if it's for health and nutrition. We read books and we start making new recipes and we buy our first vegan cookbook and et cetera. But what happens is, I think when you first realize that what changed you was seeing, right, bearing witness, seeing some kind of video, seeing some kind of documentary, whether it's online or whether it's on the street, like I used to do, then you feel that, well, gosh, I changed because of this video. That means other people will change because of it as well. So it's my duty to show other people so they'll change as well. So I think that's one of the things that happens. I think what also happens is there is this kind of subconscious feeling among, especially animal advocates who feel that if they're not speaking up for this all the time, if they're not bearing witness all the time, if they're not, literally staring at what's happening, that they're letting the animals down. And I think it's subconscious. I don't think it's a conscious thing that people do, but I do think people experience guilt around not continuing to bear witness. So the way I feel about it is again, it's kind of always about striking a balance. I think we owe it to ourselves and the animals to bear witness, but that doesn't mean we have to stare, and that doesn't mean we have to do something that's literally, masochistic. So if it's going to deplete you rather than energize you, then don't do it. If you're in a particular mood and feel particularly sad or depressed, then don't do it. It's going to just worsen it. But it also means not ever not looking again. And so I do think that if we make sure that we're revisiting every so often, that could be once a year, at least remembering what is happening out there, because just because we're not looking doesn't mean it's not happening. And if we forget, we could really quite literally forget and go back to contributing to it. So I do think we need to continue to look, but in a way that we're doing it consciously and sustainably. But I also think we need to be discerning. And this goes back to your point, is we can decide when to look. And I do give people permission to not follow accounts where all of a sudden you're going to be shocked by a horrible video, or a photo. I don't follow accounts who do that, because I want to decide when I'm going to look. And I've decided, I will look, but I want to decide. And so I think there's just guilt that people feel that if they unfollow an account, or if they delete that photo or video, or swipe away from it, if they feel that they're not being true to the animals and their suffering, right? And so the answer is yes, and you can be discerning. You're not letting the animals down by being discerning about when to look. You're just actually doing it in a way that's characterized by self-care and self-awareness.
Well, most of the ordinary vegan community have come together around health and wellness. And, many people come to veganism for animals or for the environment. But no matter how and why you come, when that epiphany comes to you, how do we hold on to that feeling? How do we not go back?
Oh my gosh. Well, that's why I wrote the whole book.
Okay. That's why I asked.
Right. So, I've been doing this work for a long time, guiding people to becoming vegan and staying vegan. But, the 30-day vegan challenge that I have really guides people through the transition. And a lot of that is the nutrition aspects we talked about, the food aspects, the cooking aspects, eating out, traveling, kind of those aspects, the practical aspects in that sense. The Joyful Vegan is really a perfect follow-up to 30-day, because it really addresses the social and the cultural and emotional aspects. And so what I began to identify after doing this work for decades is these common experiences that most everyone experiences, whether they become vegan or plant-based for health or for the animals. And I characterize them as 10 stages, but I clarify that they're not linear. You don't go from 1 to 10 and then you graduate. You can cycle through all of them or some of them in a given day. And they're also not mandatory. It's not like, now do stage 1, now do stage 2, now do stage 3. They're more experiences to identify with rather than stages to follow. But I do think they reflect what most of us go through when we make the transition. And so I named them 10 stages. I named the first one, which is the voracious consumption of information and bearing witness. And so for each stage I name, Nancy, my hope is that people will read it and go, oh yeah, that's me. Oh, I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. Other people go through this as well. But what I also do in each stage is talk about the risks that if you don't manage that stage, if you don't manage what you're going through in that stage, you could go back to eating meat, dairy, and eggs. You could forget and you could lose your way. And so I talk about solutions and strategies for managing them. So for instance, in stage 1, as we talked about bearing witness, I talk about the management of that so that you don't go back, is not over consuming, right? So yes, bear witness, yes, be aware, yes, be awake, but don't over consume because you could experience burnout or psychological distress. In the case of the health and wellness, I do think there's a way we can over consume information related to nutrition and wellness. And I think that has to do with when people believe that a whole foods plant-based diet is a panacea for all human ailments. And the risk is that if you believe that, and if you think it's a cure-all for everything, the risk is that if you get sick, or if you have some undiagnosed ailment or hard to diagnose ailment or a nutrient deficiency, you just immediately attribute that to the fact that you stopped eating meat, dairy, and eggs, and you could stop being vegan or plant-based, when really it's just about, again, managing your expectations, lowering your expectations. We remain human when we become vegan. Of course we get sick. Of course we're going to have all of the same things that non-vegans experience. Of course there are wonderful, like it's incredible to be able to reverse disease and prevent disease using food, but we're still human. So for instance, stage 2 is remorse. And it's not just remorse about, the animals. It's remorse about having contributed to what we contributed to. So the feeling of like, how could I not have known that? How could I have been part of that? And that includes how we chose to eat. So we might be experiencing health issues. We might be experiencing ways that we don't feel good about ourselves, or food that we fed to our families. And now they've been instilled in them and they don't want to eat healthfully. So it's that kind of remorse of like, how could I not have known? Like, how could I have been part of that? How could I have done this? And so I talk about managing that remorse, and that really comes through forgiveness and making a concerted effort to undo the past by changing the present. Stage 3 is coming out, and that is, kind of owning that identity and talking to your friends and family about it, and walking that line between, just being passionate and of course caring about what you're doing, but also not proselytizing. And that's stage 4, which is proselytizing and evangelism, and kind of knowing the difference between being enthusiastic and being overzealous. And then stage 5 is anger, and that does tend to be felt among mostly ethical vegans, because you feel that you're just aware of how bad things are for the animals, and you don't understand why those friends and family that you talked to in stage 3 or stage 4 didn't make a change, and nobody cares, and things are so bad, and so, we have to manage that. And of course, I talk about ways to manage that. And so it goes on. There's communication, finding your voice. There's finding your tribe, because community is so important. I think we really underestimate how much it means to us to belong socially to a group. And so when you become vegan or plant-based and you feel like you're outside the status quo, I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of people go back, is because you feel like an outsider and you feel like nobody understands, and you might get pushback, and some, people are defensive, but mostly you just don't feel like you belong, especially to the communities you once belonged to, whether they're family or culture or religion. And so all of these are, parts, necessary parts of being human, but they do seem to be magnified when we make a change that is so pervasive in our lives. I mean, eating is so pervasive. Obviously, we do it several times a day, but also it is what we center our gatherings around, and our traditions and our holidays and our celebrations. And so it's really quite instilled in us culturally. And so we need to manage how to navigate wanting to reflect our values and our desire for wellness and health and compassion, with also still being part of the communities that we grew up in. Or, it's not just a matter of finding a vegan community or a plant-based community. It's also about making sure we try and keep the relationships that we had before with non-vegans. So I unpack a lot of that in the community and communication chapters. So yeah, those are all ways that we could, risk going back to sleep and losing that losing that desire to do the right thing.
Those are great tips. I personally receive, and I'm sure you do too, many emails from teenagers who want to stop eating animals but don't know how to navigate the decision with their families, and their families aren't supporting them. What would you say to them?
Well, I think it is the case with a lot of people, whether they're teenagers or not, is that once we've had this epiphany and we're excited about it and we want to share it with our family members and so we do, we're often surprised that they don't react with the same enthusiasm that we have. And I think we assume that they're in our minds and that they've looked at all the things we've looked at, they've read the things that we've read, and they haven't. And so we've had time to process it. By the time we get to our family members, we have had the question, where do I get my protein and where do I get my calcium? And then we've sought out the answers and gotten them. But when we go to our family members and they ask the same questions, we're like, that's ridiculous. How could you think that? Of course we can get protein from plants. That's ridiculous. You're so brainwashed. And it's like, well, hi, you were probably thinking that too when you first became vegan, and you needed to seek out the answers, and so you did. So we have to remember where we were. We have to remember that there was a time we didn't know. We have to remember that that's probably where our family members are when we first come to them, and we have to give them the time and patience to seek out the answers themselves. We can certainly say, I will help you. I can give you resources if you're concerned and if you have questions, and this can be from the teenager or from anybody. I can certainly answer those questions for you and help help guide you so we can do this together, or at least so you feel better about what I'm doing. But we have to make sure that we provide that same help and support that we're expecting them to give us. And then in the end, we have to understand that they really are genuine concerns, especially parents are going to be concerned because they've all been conditioned to believe that the nutrients we need are animal-based. And so we have to understand where they're coming from. And again, try to fill in those gaps and answer those concerns so that they can feel confident. But it also takes work on your part. It's not just expecting them to go and do the legwork, even if you're giving them resources. You also need to step in. If you're a teenager, I don't care if you're 10 years old. If you're younger than that, you can help in the kitchen. So if you're expecting your mother or father, whoever cooks or whoever shops, to just make the changes for you, that's not fair. You need to help them because they literally don't know what to feed you. They have been feeding you the same thing all these years. You've loved the burgers and the hot dogs and the roasts and whatever else they've been feeding you. And now you're like, nope, not going to eat that anymore. Now go figure that out. You need to take responsibility and say, let's do this together. Let's see what we're eating now that's already vegan, or that we could just remove maybe the cheese and look, it's vegan, or make a tiny change in something that is really close to being vegetarian or vegan and say, look, we've already got recipes that are in our repertoire. And then, hey, let's try a couple new recipes together. And yes, I'll come shopping with you and I'll make it easier for you so you don't feel overwhelmed. We need to be part of the process with our family members, and we can't expect them to just completely change at the snap of our fingers, or even necessarily, support us changing at the snap of our fingers. It's a process. It's a process for everybody.
If veganism for animals is your belief system, and it's about a lot more than just eating food for a long and healthy life, how far do you actually take it? For example, do you eat in restaurants that serve animal protein? Do you have everything in your home anything in your home that contains animal products? I mean, there are thousands of technical names for animal-sourced ingredients, not only in food, but in so many products like our bedding, our lip balms, our shampoo. The list goes on and on. So how do we deal with that? And what do you say to people who want to be a perfect, flawless vegan?
I say that there is no such thing as a perfect, flawless vegan, because there's no such thing as a perfect, flawless human, and there's no such thing as a perfect, flawless world. We live in an imperfect world. We are imperfect. We have been living in a world where animal products have been the norm for hundreds and thousands of years. And so what we're doing is really bucking the system here. And so what happens when, there is no such thing. I mean, I talked literally about the fact that there's no such thing as a certified vegan. No one gets certified vegan. There's no such thing as a, professional vegan. Like, this is all of us just doing the best we can to not cause harm. And so what happens very naturally, and there's a chapter called the stretching our comfort zones, the expansion of awareness and skills. I mean, it's the same kind of idea as once you become awake, you go, wait a second, what am I doing over there? And what's happening over there? And wow, I can eat healthier over here. Or gosh, I didn't realize that there was animal products in my shampoo or whatever. You just start becoming more aware, and very naturally you start wanting to get these things out of your life. It's not that there's a rule book to follow. It's not that you get this vegan rule book and you go, I'm going to go do inventory. I'm going to take an inventory of my kitchen and my bedroom, and I'm going to get rid of everything because the rule book says that's what I need to do. That's not what it is. What happens very naturally and organically is that we don't want to contribute in all these other ways to harm against animals. And so we seek out cruelty-free products, animals, products that weren't tested on animals. We maybe buying a new couch and we go, I don't want a leather couch. Some people are confronted by that. Like they literally look at their house and go, oh my God, I have cashmere everywhere. I have wool. I have leather cars, seats in my car. And so it can be overwhelming and you can start to feel guilty. That's part of that chapter on guilt and remorse. But what happens is, practically speaking, when the time comes that you're no longer comfortable with those products, you will slowly start to replace them with the products that reflect your values. So it happens. It will happen, but relax. And not only relax about you doing it yourself, relax about other people. Because I've seen so much judgment from other vegans against, people who've just made this transition. And how is that any different than non-vegans judging vegans and trying to find their hypocrisy? I see vegans do that with other vegans or plant-based folks or vegetarians or whatever it is. Just worry about yourself, do the best you can. And very naturally, we tend to gravitate toward, just eliminating things that contributed to harm.
Colleen, you're an author, you're a vegan chef, you're a lecturer, but you're also an activist. What has been your biggest challenge in being a voice for animals?
I think the biggest challenge is what we all confront, which is I wish I could do more. I wish I knew exactly what it was that was going to help animals. And just coming to terms, I think, with the fact that it will always be something that I'm going to do. There's not an end. And when I die, there will still be animal suffering. But all I can do in this time and in this life is do the best I can to do the right thing, to live compassionately, to try and make changes for animals, whether that is helping people stop eating them or changing laws for animals, changing policies, supporting, companies that, make, cruelty-free and compassionate products. That's all I can do. It's all any of us can do. And so coming to terms with that, I think, is the hard part, because you want to believe that you can change and see an end to animal suffering. Do I think that we'll see that someday? Yeah. And I think we are arcing toward more compassionate choices as consumers. And I'm encouraged by that. I'm encouraged all the time by the changes people make, by the new products I see, by the laws that are changing. I mean, we're seeing circuses, just eliminate animals from their events. But I'll tell you this, Nancy, I mean, back in the early 1900s, it was actually here in Oakland, California. Jack London was a huge proponent of animal-free circuses, and he rallied hundreds of thousands of people. Literally, there was a Jack London club, and rallied hundreds of thousands of people to boycott the circus if they had animals, and to write to the circus and to walk out when the animals came, and to show the circus owners that they didn't support that. And there was a time when Ringling Brothers, for 4 years, they didn't have any animals in their circuses because of it. Now, the Depression happened, and people were looking for cheap entertainment, and they brought the animals back. And so that went on for another 100 years. Now look what's happened in terms of the laws that were changing, that was forcing the circuses to treat the animals humanely. And what that did was actually force them to close, because they can't, for instance, you can't control an elephant without a weapon. And so when they couldn't use that weapon, they realized they couldn't have elephants at all. And then they realized they weren't going to make enough money if the elephants weren't in the circus, and they closed. It's incredibly hopeful, and I'm really happy about that. But does that mean that circuses someday won't come back with animals? No, I don't know that that's going to happen. All we can do is just do what is the right thing now and trust that that's the best we can do. And the rest is not ours and the rest is not up to us. But I still think that's pretty awesome and empowering and feels pretty darn good to know that there is so much we can do to create and to manifest a compassionate world. We all have to just be really honest with ourselves and we have to be vigilant.
And thank you so much for everything you do. My very last question is, what can we learn from animals?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I really find that they're such good teachers for us. I think the biggest thing we can learn from animals is forgiveness. We've all seen animals who've endured abuse and neglect and who are scared to death of humans as a species because that's the only experience they had was negative, and who forgive and heal and have a relationship eventually with other humans. And I think we can learn a lot from animals, specifically around letting go of the past, understanding that the person in front of us doesn't necessarily represent every single person who's ever hurt us, and that we can heal and we can be stronger and better for it. And I think that's one of the best things we can learn from animals.
Colleen, thank you so much for sharing your compassion with the ordinary vegan community today. We really appreciate it, and I know everybody's going to want to go out and get by the Joyful Vegan. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
That's it for today's podcast. Thank you so much for being here. This podcast grows by sharing, so please share. And thank you for your emails, postings, reviews, and all your kind words. I couldn't do any of this without all of you. And a special thank you to Colleen Patrick Goudreau for sharing her unique gift with all of us today. You can find show notes and links to all of Colleen's books, website, podcasts in this week's show notes. Her new book, The Joyful Vegan, has been released on Amazon and will make a wonderful holiday gift. I am happy to say Ordinary Vegan's CBD line is featured in Retirement Life magazine this month with Olivia Newton-John on the cover. Olivia is also turning to CBD oil for the aches and pains of life. You can find the article online at retirementlifemagazine.com and all my CBD products at ordinaryvegan.net/shop. Thanks, everyone. Till next time.
Thanks for joining our plant-based community today. Together, we can accomplish great things. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of Ordinary Vegan's recipes and plant-based tips. If you have any questions or feedback, email us at questions@ordinaryvegan.net. Until next time.